At its height, the British Empire was the largest empire in human history. It covered a quarter of the Earth's landmass, ruled over 450 million people, and was so massive that people famously said the sun never set on it. Which is kind of funny, because for most of human history, Britain was not a mighty empire at all. It was a cold, rainy, mud-soaked island off the coast of Europe that literally everyone else in the world took turns invading, burning, and bullying. The Romans conquered it, the Saxons conquered it, the Vikings raided it, the French took it over, and somehow, out of 1,600 years of non-stop invasions, religious civil wars, royal decapitations, and absolute chaos, this tiny island managed to accidentally invent the modern world and conquer a fourth of the globe, only to lose it all and spend the 21st century arguing about whether to leave Europe. How on earth does a soggy island go from an international punching bag to the biggest superpower in history? To understand that, we have to rewind 1,600 years back to the year 410 AD, right when the Roman Empire was collapsing. For 400 years, Britain had been a quiet province of the Roman Empire. The Romans built paved roads, heated stone baths, and grand villas. But by 410 AD, the city of Rome was getting sacked by barbarians. So the Roman emperor sent a polite letter to the Britons basically saying, "Sorry guys, we need our soldiers back home. You are on your own now, good luck." And good luck was the one thing Britain did not have. The moment the Roman army marched away, local British tribes realized they had no army, no armor, and no idea how to defend themselves. Sensing weakness, Germanic tribes from across the North Sea, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, paddled over in wooden boats. At first, they came as mercenaries to help defend the island, but then they looked around at the fertile green fields and said, why leave? They pushed the native Britons west into the mountains of Wales and Cornwall, settled down, and renamed the land England, which eventually became England. For 300 years, the Anglo-Saxons farmed, built wooden halls, and established 7 small kingdoms. But just as things were starting to settle down, a new nightmare arrived on the horizon in the year 793 AD. Imagine you are a peaceful monk sitting in a monastery on the isolated island of Lindisfarne. You look out at the ocean and see wooden dragon-headed ships cutting through the waves. Out stepped the Vikings. Now, the Vikings realize something very quickly. Monks take a vow of non-violence. Yep. And they hoard gold and silver chalices. And there is 0 army protecting them. Nope. Well, that is just terrible planning on their part. Load up the boats. Word spread across Scandinavia like wildfire. Raiding England became the ultimate summer job for every ambitious young Norseman. The Vikings burned monasteries, looted towns, and eventually stopped leaving. They conquered 3 whole Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, setting up their own territory called the Danelaw. Look at this map. By the late 800s, almost the entire island had fallen to the Vikings. Only one tiny Anglo-Saxon kingdom was left standing in the south. Wessex, ruled by a clever king named Alfred the Great. Alfred did not just fight, he adapted. He built a network of fortified towns called burghs, created Britain's first real navy, and beat the Vikings in battle, forcing them to make peace. By 927 AD, Alfred's grandson Athelstan united all the Anglo-Saxon and Viking lands into one single country for the very first time. England was born. Spoiler alert, the peace did not last long. Fast forward to the year 1066. This is the single most chaotic year in British history, known as the Year of 3 Kings. King Edward the Confessor died without leaving a clear heir. Immediately, 3 different men claimed they were the rightful king of England. First, a powerful English nobleman named Harold Godwinson seized the crown. Second, the giant king of Norway, Harald Hardrada, invaded from the north with a massive Viking army, claiming the throne was his. Third, a fierce French-speaking nobleman across the English Channel named William, Duke of Normandy, claimed that the late king had promised him the throne on a pinky promise years earlier. King Harold of England had to deal with both invaders at the same time. He marched his army north and completely smashed the Vikings at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, killing the Norwegian king. But while his men were still celebrating and nursing their wounds, a messenger arrived out of breath. Sir, Duke William of Normandy just landed in the south with an army of knights. Harold had to turn his exhausted soldiers around and sprint 250 miles south to Hastings. On October 14, 1066, the 2 armies clashed at the Battle of Hastings. It was a brutal, day-long slugfest. Legend says King Harold took an arrow straight to the eyeball, causing the English army to break and run. William won the day, earned the legendary nickname William the Conqueror, and was crowned King of England inside Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day. The Norman conquest completely transformed Britain. William replaced the entire Anglo-Saxon ruling class with French-speaking Norman nobles. For the next 300 years, the kings of England spoke French, while the common peasants kept speaking Old English. The two languages mashed together over centuries, creating the bizarre, chaotic English language we speak today. William also built giant stone castles all over the country to keep the locals from rebelling, and conducted the Domesday Book, a massive census that counted every farm, pig, cow, and tree in England so he could tax them. By the 1100s and 1200s, English kings had become incredibly powerful, exceedingly wealthy, and completely out of control. Take King John, for example. John is famously known as the villain from the Robin Hood stories, and in real life, he was somehow even worse. He lost almost all of England's lands in France, raised taxes to insane levels, starved his political rivals to death in dungeons, and pissed off almost every nobleman in the kingdom. By 1215, the English barons had had enough. They surrounded King John at a meadow called Runnymede, pulled out their swords, and handed him a piece of parchment. "Sign this, or we cut your head off." Fair point. What is it? It is called the Magna Carta. It says you cannot throw people in prison without a trial, and you cannot raise taxes without our permission. King John reluctantly stamped his seal on the Magna Carta. For the first time in European history, a law was established declaring that even the king was not above the law. It laid the very first stepping stone toward modern democracy. Then, the 1300s arrived, and things went sideways fast. First came the Black Death in 1348. The bubonic plague swept across Britain, killing up to half the entire population in less than 2 years. Entire villages were abandoned, fields went unharvested, and the feudal system began to crumble because surviving peasants could suddenly demand higher wages. Then came the 100 Years' War, a century-long brawl between England and France over who owned the French crown. English longbowmen dominated early battles like Agincourt. But thanks to a teenage peasant girl named Joan of Arc, France eventually rallied and kicked the English off the continent for good. Back home in England, losing the war in France triggered a bloody 30-year civil war between two rival branches of the royal family, the House of Lancaster, whose symbol was a red rose, and the House of York, whose symbol was a white rose. Historians call it the Wars of the Roses. Family members murdered family members, kings were deposed and restored, and nobles switched sides constantly. The chaos finally ended in 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth Field, when a young Welsh nobleman named Henry Tudor defeated King Richard III, married a Yorkist princess, combined the red and white roses into the Tudor rose, and claimed the throne as King Henry VII. The Tudor era had begun, and it was about to get wild. Henry VII was quiet and saved money. His son, Henry VIII, was the exact opposite. Henry VIII started his reign as a handsome, athletic young king who loved jousting, music, and spending money. But his absolute obsession was having a male heir to keep the Tudor dynasty alive. His first wife, Catherine of Aragon, gave birth to a daughter, Mary, but no surviving sons. Henry wanted a divorce so he could marry a young court lady named Anne Boleyn. There was just one big problem. Henry was Catholic, and the Pope in Rome refused to grant the divorce. So, Henry did what any reasonable, moderate monarch would do. He completely cut ties with Rome, declared himself the supreme head of a brand new national church called the Church of England, and granted himself his own divorce. When monasteries objected, Henry shut them down, seized their massive wealth, and gave their lands to his loyal nobles. Anne Boleyn became queen, but she also failed to give him a son, giving birth to a daughter named Elizabeth. Accusing Anne of treason and adultery, Henry had her head chopped off. In total, Henry went through 6 wives: divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. When Henry died in 1547, he left behind a country torn apart by religious turmoil. His Catholic daughter, Mary I, took the throne and earned the nickname Bloody Mary by burning hundreds of Protestants at the stake. When Mary died in 1558, her Protestant half-sister Elizabeth I became queen. Elizabeth was brilliant, sharp, and fiercely independent. She refused to marry any foreign prince, declaring that she was married to England. Catholic Spain, the supreme superpower of the day, got sick of Elizabeth supporting Dutch rebels and English privateers like Sir Francis Drake, who were plundering Spanish gold ships. In 1588, King Philip II of Spain launched the Spanish Armada, a massive fleet of 130 warships carrying 30,000 soldiers, designed to invade England and restore Catholicism. Look at this map. A tiny island nation facing the mightiest fleet in Europe. The English maneuvered smaller, faster ships equipped with long-range cannons, battering the slow Spanish galleons. Then, under the cover of dark, the English sent burning fire ships drifting into the anchored Spanish fleet. The Spanish panicked, cut their anchors, and scattered. A devastating Arctic storm pushed the surviving Spanish ships all the way around Scotland and Ireland, wrecking dozens of vessels on the rocks. England had survived. The victory gave the island nation a brand new sense of swagger and confidence. The golden age of Shakespeare, exploration, and theater was in full swing. When Elizabeth died childless in 1603, the Tudor line ended. The crown passed to her cousin, King James VI of Scotland, who marched south to become King James I of England. For the first time, England and Scotland were ruled by the exact same monarch. James survived the infamous gunpowder plot in 1605, where Catholic conspirators led by Guy Fawkes tried to blow up Parliament with 36 barrels of gunpowder. But James's son, Charles I, was not so lucky. Charles believed in the divine right of kings, the idea that God appointed him, so he could rule without Parliament, raise taxes whenever he wanted, and lock up anyone who complained. Parliament did not agree. By 1642, the tension exploded into the English Civil War. It was the Roundheads who supported Parliament and were led by a stern Puritan named Oliver Cromwell against the Cavaliers who supported the king. Cromwell created the New Model Army, a highly disciplined, fanatic religious force. Parliament won the war, captured King Charles I, put him on trial for high treason against his own people, and on a cold January morning in 1649, chopped his head off outside his own palace. England abolished the monarchy and declared itself a republic. Cromwell took charge as Lord Protector, but he turned out to be a total killjoy. Under his strict Puritan rule, he banned Christmas, banned theater, banned sports, and banned makeup. If you were caught celebrating Christmas, soldiers could confiscate your roast goose. By the time Cromwell died in 1658, the British public was so thoroughly miserable and sick of religious fanatics that they called the late king's son, Charles II, back from exile and restored the monarchy in 1660. Hey, welcome back. Sorry we chopped your dad's head off. Water under the bridge. Can we bring back party music and beer? Yes, please. In 1707, England and Scotland officially signed the Act of Union, merging their parliaments to create one single nation, Great Britain. And almost immediately, Britain hit the economic turbo button. In the mid-1700s, the Industrial Revolution kicked off in the north of England. Inventors like James Watt perfected the steam engine. Factories popped up everywhere, powered by massive coal reserves underneath British soil. Machinery replaced hand tools, railways crisscrossed the country. Smog filled the skies of London, Manchester, and Birmingham. Britain became the workshop of the world, producing half the world's iron and cloth. Armed with industrial factories and the most dominant navy on the ocean, Britain set out to build a global empire. They grabbed colonies everywhere. They took control of Canada, conquered India piece by piece using a private corporation called the East India Company, set up penal colonies in Australia, bought trade access in China by winning the Opium Wars, and carved up vast stretches of Africa. By the late Victorian era in the late 1800s, Queen Victoria ruled over a global empire spanning tens of millions of square miles. British culture, the English language, tea, cricket, and parliamentary systems were exported to every corner of the planet. As the old saying went, the sun never set on the British Empire. Mainly because God did not trust a Brit in the dark. By 1900, Britain was the indisputable king of the hill, but the 20th century was waiting with a sledgehammer. In 1914, World War I broke out. Britain and its empire fought a brutal 4-year war of attrition against Germany in the muddy trenches of France. An entire generation of young British men was wiped out. Britain won the war, but it emerged broke, exhausted, and deeply traumatized. Then, just 20 years later, in 1939, World War II erupted. By mid-1940, France had fallen, and Britain stood almost entirely alone against Nazi Germany. Under the stubborn leadership of Prime Minister Winston Churchill, Britain refused to surrender. For 8 months during the Blitz, the German Luftwaffe rained bombs down on London and other British cities every single night. Citizens slept in underground tube stations while the Royal Air Force fought desperate dogfights in the skies above. Britain survived, joined forces with the United States and the Soviet Union, and ultimately defeated Nazi Germany in 1945. But the war broke the empire's bank account for good. Britain was completely bankrupt. The world had changed. The United States and the Soviet Union were the new superpowers. Over the next 30 years, the British Empire unraveled at lightning speed. India gained independence in 1947, followed by colonies across Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean throughout the 1950s and 60s. The empire that had taken 300 years to build vanished in less than 3 decades. Back on the island, Britain rebuilt itself. It created the National Health Service, welcoming thousands of immigrants from former colonies in the Caribbean and South Asia to help rebuild the country, transforming Britain into a multicultural nation. In 1973, Britain joined the European Economic Community, tying its economic future to Europe. The late 20th century saw decades of violent sectarian conflict in Northern Ireland known as the Troubles, which was finally brought to peace by the historic Good Friday Agreement in 1998. By the early 2000s, Britain seemed comfortable with its new identity, a medium-sized European island nation with massive cultural weight, famous for music, sports, movies, and historical prestige. Then came 2016. Frustrated by European Union regulations, immigration policies, and economic austerity, the British public voted in a historic referendum to leave the European Union. Brexit fractured the nation's politics. England and Wales voted overwhelmingly to leave, while Scotland and Northern Ireland voted to stay. After 4 years of political chaos, arguments, and prime ministers resigning, Britain officially left the EU in 2020. Today, Britain is smaller, louder, and more politically divided than it has been in decades. It no longer rules the oceans or commands a global empire. So what does it mean to be Great Britain when the empire is long gone, and the world no longer waits for your instructions? The short answer: adaptation. From Roman villas to Saxon huts, from Viking raids to Norman castles, from Tudor execution blocks to industrial smog, Britain's history has never been a story of calm stability. It has always been a story of surviving chaos, reinventing itself, and somehow muddling through. If you enjoyed this wild 1,600-year ride through British history, hit that like button and subscribe for more epic deep dives. And if you think 1,600 years of British chaos is crazy, wait until you hear about the 300-year reign of the Vikings. The very invaders who founded cities in Ireland, settled France, and literally created the Russian state. Click here to watch the story of the Vikings next, and I will catch you next time.